The first time I stepped inside my grandmother's old house, I felt an immediate weight pressing down on me. It wasn't just the age of the place, it was something else. Something that seemed to breathe within the walls. The wooden floor groaned under every step, as if the house itself resented being disturbed after so many years of silence. Dust floated in the narrow shafts of light, seeping through cracked windows, and the air smelled faintly of mildew, old books, and something sweetly rotten, like fruit left too long in the sun. The hallway stretched before me, long and narrow, with faded wallpaper peeling off like shedding skin. At the very end of that hallway stood a door, unlike the others. While the rest of the house had ordinary doors painted white, this one was different, ancient, heavy, made of dark wood that seemed far older than the house itself. Its surface was covered in faint scratches, too high for an animal, too chaotic to be made by a person with reason. There was no lock, no keyhole, just a cold brass knob that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. I couldn't explain why, but the sight of it filled me with unease, as though the door itself was watching me, waiting. Grandma's words echoed in my mind even then. Never open that door at midnight. I had laughed nervously when she told me, trying to brush it off as one of her old-world superstitions, the kind passed down in hushed voices to keep children obedient. But the look in her eyes as she spoke was not one of folklore or gestite, was fear. Deep, bone-deep fear, as if she had seen something behind that door, something no one should ever see. That night, as I unpacked my belongings, I tried not to glance down the hallway, but my eyes betrayed me. Again and again, sliding toward the silhouette of that door in the shadows. It seemed larger than it had in the daylight, like it was stretching, swelling, alive. My heart told me one thing clearly, even before the first knock came. Whatever lay behind that door was not meant for me, not meant for anyone. It happened the night before she left me alone in that house. My grandmother had always been a stern, unshakable woman, the kind who could work through storms, bury her grief in silence, and never once let fear cross her face. That was why her sudden trembling caught me off guard. She had been helping me unpack, folding my clothes with her frail hands. The house creaked around us, sighing with the cool evening wind. Just as she reached the last box, she froze. Her gaze drifted toward the end of the hallway, where the heavy wooden door loomed in the shadows. For a moment, she looked so fragile, so unlike herself, that I stopped what I was doing. Then she turned to me. Her eyes clouded with age, yet burning with something fierce, locked onto mine. She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Her hand was icy, her grip desperate. "Listen to me," she whispered, her voice cracking with urgency. "Whatever you do, never open that door at midnight." At first I chuckled nervously, thinking it was just one of her old stories, the kind she used to scare me with as a child. But her expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. Her lips quivered, but not from weakness, from terror. "You don't understand," she continued, almost pleading. "That door is not meant to be opened. I made that mistake once. Once is enough. Promise me you won't." Her words sent a chill through me. I wanted to ask what happened. What did she see? But every time the question formed on my tongue, her grip tightened as if to silence me. Her eyes glistened, not just with fear, but with the weight of memory. The silence stretched, broken only by the ticking clock in the living room. Finally, I nodded, half to comfort her, half to stop the intensity of that moment. "I promise," I said, though I didn't truly believe there was anything to fear. She released my wrist slowly, her fingers lingering as though reluctant to let go. Then, with a voice barely above a whisper, she repeated the words that would etch themselves into my mind. "Never open that door at midnight." I should have listened. That first night alone in the house was heavier than I expected. Daylight had softened its edges. Let me pretend it was just another old building with quirks and creaks. But when the sun dipped and the last trace of orange slipped behind the horizon, the house changed. Shadows thickened, stretching long and unnatural along the walls. The air cooled, sharp against my skin, and every sound, every sigh of the wind, every groan of the wooden beams seemed amplified in the silence. I had unpacked just enough to make the bedroom livable. My bed faced the hallway, and even with the door half closed, I could see the faint outline of that ominous door at the end. I told myself not to look, not to think about Grandma's words, but the memory of her trembling voice clawed at my mind. Never open that door at midnight. The old grandfather clock in the living room ticked loudly, each swing of its pendulum echoing through the stillness. I counted the hours as they passed, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock sleep, refusing to come. I stared at the ceiling, willing my body to relax. When the chimes finally struck 12, that was when it happened. 3 knocks, slow, heavy. Each one reverberated through the hallway, through my chest. Boom, boom, boom. My entire body froze. I held my breath, straining to listen for footsteps, for movement, but after the knocks, there was nothing. Only silence so complete, it rang in my ears. My heart thudded like it was trying to escape my chest. I wanted to believe it was the pipes, the house settling, something mundane, but deep down, I knew better. There had been weight in those knocks, intention. It felt like something was announcing its presence. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, every muscle stiff with fear. Minutes stretched into hours, each one filled with the memory of that sound. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me into a restless sleep, but not before a thought lodged itself in my mind like a splinter. It wasn't the house making noise. Something was on the other side of that door. If the first night had unsettled me, the second night nearly broke me. The sun set faster than I wanted it to, as if the day itself was eager to abandon me to the darkness of that house. All evening, I couldn't stop glancing at the hallway, at the heavy wooden door waiting silently at the end. The memory of those 3 knocks clung to me like a stain. I tried to convince myself it had been my imagination, fatigue, nerves. Anything but the truth gnawed at me with every passing hour. By 11 o'clock, my chest was tight with dread. I sat upright in bed, clutching the blanket like a shield, staring at the glowing hands of the clock as they crept toward midnight. I counted the seconds, hoping for silence, hoping it had all been nothing. But as the 12th chime echoed through the house, it came again. Boom, 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 boom. The same deliberate knocks, shaking through the hallway. Only this time, something followed. A whisper, faint, broken, like breath slipping through a crack in the wall. At first, I couldn't make out the words. It was too soft, too fragmented. My skin prickled, every hair on my arms standing tall. I leaned forward, against every instinct in my body, straining my ears. Then I heard it, clearer. Let me in. The voice was low, pleading, but twisted like it belonged to something that knew how to sound human but wasn't. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. I pressed my hands over my ears, rocking slightly in bed, whispering to myself, "It's not real, it's not real, it's not real." But even through the muffled silence of my palms, I could hear it, soft, persistent. Let me in. The knocking stopped after a while, but the whisper lingered, as if it had seeped into the walls, into the air, into me. When the voice finally faded, the silence that followed wasn't relief. It was worse. It felt like the house was holding its breath, waiting for me to answer. I lay awake until dawn, my body rigid, my mind replaying the words over and over again. Let me in. And though I hadn't moved an inch toward that door, I felt like I already had. The nights that followed bled together, each one darker and heavier than the last. Sleep became a stranger to me. I would lie in bed with my eyes wide open, watching the faint silhouette of that door at the end of the hallway, waiting for the inevitable. The clock would strike 12, and the house would come alive with the sound of knocking. Always 3, always measured, always aimed directly at my sanity. But the knocking was no longer alone. Each night it grew bolder, angrier, as if whatever lingered beyond that door was losing patience. The whispers that once sounded like faint pleas now hissed with sharp clarity. Let me in, let me out. You hear me, you must. The words slithered under the crack of the door, filling my room, curling into my ears like smoke. I covered my head with pillows, pressed my palms against my ears until they burned, but nothing could shut it out. And then the scratches began. The first time I saw them, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. Long, jagged lines carved into the surface of the wooden door, as if by claws desperate to dig their way free. The next night, more appeared, deeper, angrier, splintering the old wood. I ran my hand across them one morning, and I swore I could still feel warmth radiating from the grooves, as though whatever had made them was still lingering, still watching. By the end of the week, my nerves were shredded. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps approaching my room. Every gust of wind against the windows felt like a breath on the back of my neck. I stopped turning off the lights at night, but even in the glow of the lamp, the shadows in that hallway seemed to move, stretching toward me, whispering promises I didn't want to hear. The door at the end of the hallway was no longer just a door. It was a presence. It throbbed in my vision, pulsing with hunger. I avoided looking at it during the day, but it was always there, looming in the corner of my eye. I tried to call Grandma once, desperate to hear her voice, to beg her for answers, but every time I dialed, the line filled with static, and faintly, underneath the crackling noise, I heard it again, that same voice, whispering, "Let me in." I dropped the phone and didn't pick it up again. Fear had once ruled me, but fear has a way of changing shape when it lingers too long. It doesn't just paralyze you, it infects you, gnaws at you until it twists into something else. For me, that something was obsession. At first, I avoided the hallway altogether, rushing past it with my eyes fixed on the floor, pretending the door didn't exist. But the harder I tried not to think about it, the more it consumed me. I would catch myself staring at it from the corner of my vision, unable to stop. The scratches across its surface seemed to shift daily, as if each night added another angry mark. Sometimes I swore I could see the wood quiver slightly, pulsing like a heartbeat. I stopped sleeping. Nights bled into days, and I walked through them in a haze, my thoughts circling endlessly around the same questions. What's behind the door? Why can't it be opened? What did Grandma see? Every knock, every whisper was a reminder that someone waited just beyond that threshold. I tried to distract myself. Books, music, even leaving the television on at all hours. But no matter what I did, when midnight came, the house fell silent, until the sound started. The knocks, the whispers, the scratching, they invaded my skull, louder than any noise I tried to drown them with. And then came the dreams. Or at least, I think they were dreams. I'd close my eyes for a moment, only to find myself standing in the hallway, the door before me, wide open. Beyond it stretched nothing but endless blackness, a void that seemed to breathe. A pair of eyes, white, unblinking, would appear in the dark, staring into me. When I jolted awake, sweat drenching my skin, I'd find myself sitting upright in bed, staring directly at the hallway, always at the door. The more I resisted, the stronger the pull became. My fear no longer screamed for me to run, it whispered for me to look. Just once, just to know. The door had become a part of me, a shadow clinging to my thoughts. I would stand in the hallway during the day, staring at it for long minutes at a time, my hand hovering inches from the knob. I told myself I wasn't going to open it, not yet, not ever, if I could help it. But deep down, I already knew the truth. It was only a matter of time. The door was calling me, and I was listening. By the time the seventh night arrived, I was no longer myself. My reflection in the mirror told me so, sunken eyes ringed with shadows, skin pale and clammy, lips cracked from nights of sleepless murmuring. I barely ate, barely spoke. I only listened to the knocks, to the whispers, to the endless scratching that had become the soundtrack of my nights. The day leading into that night was heavier than all the others. The air in the house seemed thicker, suffocating, as if even the walls knew what was coming. I tried to fight it, I truly did. I brewed coffee until my stomach churned, blasted music until my head pounded, even shoved a chair against my bedroom door, like a child hiding from a nightmare. But when the grandfather clock began its slow chime toward midnight, everything else in the house seemed to fall silent, waiting for the ritual to begin. Dong, dong, dong. With the 12th strike, it came again. Boom, boom, boom. The knocks rattled the hallway with a violence I had never heard before. The door shook in its frame, dust falling from the ceiling. My body was trembling, but not with fear alone. Something deeper surged in me, an urge, a hunger. And then came the voice, louder now, no longer a faint whisper through the wood. It slithered through the hallway, crawling into my room, into my head. I'm waiting. Open it. I pressed my hands against my ears, but it didn't help. The words weren't just in the air, they were inside me, vibrating through my bones. My body moved before my mind could stop it. I slid out of bed, feet dragging across the cold floor, pulled forward like a puppet on strings. The hallway stretched longer than it ever had, shadows pooling in its corners, swallowing the light. The door loomed larger with every step, its surface scarred with deep, fresh gaps. I swear I could see something pushing against it from the other side, subtle bulges, the faint outline of fingers clawing outward. My breathing grew ragged. My heart thundered so loudly it drowned out everything else. Yet still, I walked, still, I reached. When I stopped, I was standing right before it. The air was icy, each breath stabbing my lungs. My hand rose, trembling, hovering inches from the brass knob that gleamed faintly in the dark. Every part of me screamed to run, to turn back, to remember Grandma's desperate eyes and her words. But another voice whispered louder now, drowning her out. One look, just one look, that's all it takes. And against all reason, I listened. My hand hovered above the knob, trembling violently. It wasn't just fear, it was the war between two voices inside me. One screamed with my grandmother's desperation, echoing her warning, "Never open that door at midnight." The other was not my own, not truly. It whispered with velvet insistence, coaxing me, soothing me like a lullaby. "You've come this far. Just turn it, just one look." The brass knob was colder than ice when my fingertips brushed it. A shiver shot through me so violently I almost turned away. Almost, but the knocks thundered again, shaking the wood, and the whispers surged, filling my skull until there was no room for thought. Open it now. I wrapped my hand around the knob, my breath hitching as though I had plunged it into frozen water. My heart pounded, my ears rang, and for a fleeting moment I hesitated. I thought about running, about locking myself in my room, about calling Grandma one last time. But it was too late. My hand was no longer mine. It twisted, slow and steady, the metal grinding in protest. The door creaked. At first, it opened only a fraction, just enough for a sliver of blackness to bleed through. Not the darkness of a room unlit, but something deeper, thicker, like ink spilling into the world. The hallway light behind me flickered, sputtering as though choking on the void. A wave of air rushed out, frigid and damp, carrying with it the scent of decay, mold, and something coppery, like blood, left too long to dry. I gagged, my stomach twisting, but I couldn't pull back. The door was opening wider now, the gap yawning like a mouth. Then it happened. The knocking stopped, the whispers went silent, the scratching ceased, and in that terrible pause, that suffocating silence, I realized the truth. It hadn't been trying to get out, it had been waiting for me to let it through. Before I could slam the door shut, the void beyond seemed to lurch forward, swallowing the faint light of the hallway. My flashlight flickered in my grip, beam shaking across the impenetrable black. I saw nothing, heard nothing, yet felt everything. Two pale fingers curled around the edge of the door from the inside, pulling it wider. I gasped, stumbling back a step, but my hand didn't let go of the knob. It was as if the cold metal fused with my skin, holding me in place. The door groaned open, inch by inch, until it stood wide enough to reveal a darkness so alive it seemed to breathe. And in that moment, as the void reached out to greet me, I understood with soul-shattering certainty. I had made the mistake my grandmother had begged me to avoid. I had opened the door at midnight. The darkness wasn't empty. I knew it the moment it touched me. It moved, not like shadow, not like smoke, but like a living thing, coiling and stretching into the hallway. The air thickened as it poured out, pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. My flashlight beam cut through only a fraction of it, illuminating swirling blackness that seemed to recoil and twist, as though aware of being seen. Then I heard it, breathing, not mine, not human. It rasped like air dragged through broken glass, shallow at first, then deeper, louder, until the walls vibrated with each inhalation. The smell followed a stench of rot and damp earth, of graves left open to the sun. My stomach lurched, bile rising in my throat, but I couldn't move. My hands still clung to the doorknob, my body frozen in place, as if the void itself had claimed me. And then, from within the swirling black, two pale hands emerged, thin, too thin. The fingers were impossibly long, tipped with nails cracked and jagged. They clutched the doorframe with a strength that splintered the wood, dragging the rest of it forward. The face came next. It was wrong. That was my first thought, wrong in a way my mind struggled to understand. The skin was grey, stretched taut across sharp bones, and the eyes, God, the eyes. They were hollow, cavernous pits glowing faintly with a sickly white light, staring directly into me. Its mouth spread into a grin so wide it split the skin at the corners, revealing teeth that were far too many, far too sharp. And then it spoke, not in a whisper this time, but in a voice that clawed its way inside my skull, vibrating in my bones. I told you, let me in. The words weren't just heard, they were felt, rattling through every nerve in my body. I screamed, finally wrenching myself free from the doorknob, stumbling back, but the thing lunged faster than my fear could carry me. Its cold hands seized my arms with a grip like iron. My skin burned under its touch, freezing and searing at the same time. I thrashed, kicked, begged, but it only grinned wider. The void behind it yawned open like a gaping maw, pulling at me with an invisible force. I clawed at the floor, my fingernails tearing against the wood, leaving bloody streaks. My cries echoed through the empty house, unanswered. The thing leaned close, its hollow eyes inches from mine, its voice dripping with satisfaction. "You opened the door. Now you belong to me." With a violent tug, it dragged me into the darkness, and the door slammed shut. The house was quiet the next morning, too quiet. Neighbors who passed by said they noticed it immediately, the stillness that clung to the air. Around the old property, no lights in the windows, no faint sound of footsteps on the creaking floorboards, no presence at all. Only the hallway door stood open, its frame splintered where pale hands had gripped it, the wood scarred with deep, angry scratches. Beyond it, there was nothing, no room, no wall, just emptiness, as though the darkness had swallowed a piece of the house whole. I was gone, but the house was not empty. Visitors who dared to step inside claimed they felt watched the moment they crossed the threshold. The air was cold, unnaturally so, even in the middle of summer. Some swore they heard faint tapping sounds echoing from the hallway, 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Others spoke of whispers seeping through the walls, fragments of a plea they could never quite make out. And once, a child who wandered in described a figure at the end of the hallway, someone standing just inside the open door, their face hidden in shadow, their hand lifted as though beckoning. They never found me, of course. How could they? What waited beyond that door was not of this world. It was not a place where the living belonged. The only trace of me was the shredded wood where my nails had raked across the floor, desperate to hold on. Grandma never came back to the house. When the neighbors asked, she only shook her head, her lips pressed tight, her eyes glassy with tears. "I told them," she whispered once. "I told them never to open it at midnight." And that was all she ever said. To this day, the house still stands, abandoned, silent, waiting. The door at the end of the hallway remains open, though no one dares to approach it. Midnight comes, and with it, the knocks. Boom boom boom. And if you listen closely, beneath the knocking, beneath the whispers, you might hear something else. A voice, hoarse, frantic, begging. My voice, screaming from the other side, where the silence never ends.